Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Yellow Squared podcast. And this week, we're just going to be going through our thoughts and feelings on the past couple games over the Easter weekend, and then just sort of a brief overview of the players individually, because I think this weekend has shown us that the players are quite a large chunk of the issue in the club at the moment. But I'm, of course, joined with my brother James. Hello, James. Good evening.
Hey, mate. Hello, everyone. Hope we're all right.
Yeah. So we'll get things started then. I don't know if you wanted to kick things off with your feelings on the past couple of games over the weekend.
Yeah, happy to. Two games Easter weekend: Huddersfield and Coventry. A grand total of 1 point. Yeah, many problems. I think it was most keenly felt after the Huddersfield loss, particularly in the manner of it, to lose 3-2 to a team who I think were in the bottom three at the time, albeit they're on an upturn of form with Neil Warnock at the moment. But that felt like a breaking point for everybody in the ground on that day. And I know, where we were following it, it was just sort of that kind of resigned, defeated feeling, at least for me anyway, when you saw that we were losing and yet again we'd taken the lead and the team had just fallen apart. I think you have to acknowledge the atmosphere in the ground. Everybody was speaking about it. It was all over Watford socials. It was being picked up by the mainstream media and news that that the atmosphere in the ground had turned toxic towards the players and the ownership. I think it's the first time that sort of pots are out and banners and chants towards the players, not being fit to wear the shirt, really sort of picked up.
Yeah.
And listening to the From the Rooker End guys and Do Not Scratch Your Eyes and everybody who is kind of in sort of the Watford content creation and podcasting environment. I think it was sort of a realization that it's about time that the players copped it really, and it's been brewing for a number of weeks. I mean, the performances across the board have been really disappointing. So yeah, it felt like another rock bottom if you can get below the loop after Huddersfield, and then Chris Wilder came out after the Huddersfield game, clearly furious, said some more sort of quite powerful things, and a change in style into the Coventry game, which I know you went to.
Yep.
And I don't think it can be overstated. For 60 minutes, we blew Coventry apart.
Yeah.
We looked so sharp. We scored 2 really good goals. I thought we looked so good going forward, and when we needed to defend, we did. And then I think, which is going to be the vast majority of what we're going to talk about today, as soon as we conceded, you just saw the confidence drain from everybody, and the players, in my opinion, hit the panic button and just completely wilted away. And Coventry players felt it. The Coventry fans felt it. And they just, to be honest, they just beat us into submission until we gave away an equaliser.
Yeah.
And to be honest, should have lost because they should have had a penalty. And I think that for the Coventry game is perfect in sort of describing our season as a whole. Glimpses of brilliance, an inability to be consistent, and just a complete lack of, I'm going to say, leadership on the pitch. No, there's no one out there, trying to calm people down. There's nobody out there trying to drag people through. I didn't see enough. To be honest, I didn't see enough time wasting. If we're gonna go down this route, why do teams get results when they come to the Vic? they know how to play us, and part of that is just frustration and slowing the game down.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant to watch when we were 2-0 up, and you know, we were pinging the ball around, and we were, you know, all the flicks and tricks were coming off. But there had to have been a point where we start to go, okay, we're just going to try and slow this down, and we didn't. So yeah, 1 point from 6 available, 7 points dropped from winning positions in the last 4 games, and it just feels so flat again. And yeah, you said it at the start. The players and the playing staff are I think are a large problem with what we're seeing at the club writ large with the men's senior team.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we'll look at in a lot more detail, I think, in the close season. But we're just looking at the players tonight. I think, yeah, this Easter weekend really rammed home some of the major flaws that are within this squad. Rant over. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Well, I think the Huddersfield game, sort of was a breaking point for a lot of the fans who particularly go to games themselves, because we've seen on, you know, social media a lot recently, people are unhappy with the ownership, and we know that Twitter is definitely an echo chamber for the most extreme views. But it was, it did feel genuinely like a real breaking point that even the fans who go to every game, sit in the Rookery end, you know, it did feel like a real breaking point for those fans who obviously felt that it was the players. I mean, we saw the banner before the game that said something like "No heart, no passion. It's the players, not the coach." And like I said in one of the most recent podcasts we did, obviously the players have to take a lot of responsibility for sort of the downfall of Watford. We've tried every single type of coach in the last 18 months in particular. Young, exciting English manager, old English manager, old manager, somebody who's won it all, somebody who's won it all, somebody who's quite inexperienced and new and exciting. And, you know, Rob Edwards left Watford. I mean, his tenure was cut incredibly short, but he's obviously left and gone on to do incredibly well with Luton. Roy Hodgson's recently come out of retirement after having an 11% win rate with Watford, and is now 2 from 2 with Crystal Palace.
Yes, he is.
I think obviously it now has to be put on the weight of the shoulders of the players themselves, because there's clearly a mentality issue.
Yeah.
When we go 1-0 up, I mean, when we're up, but any slight bit of pressure and it just feels like the confidence just drains out of the players. We didn't watch the Huddersfield game, but it's as clear as day that, you know, the same thing has been happening all season. We've seen it Reading away, 2-0 up, cruising, concede a silly penalty, and then the atmosphere and the players themselves just fizzle out into nothing. And then obviously we've seen many equalisers, but Huddersfield obviously was a real breaking point for many Watford fans, and it's just really on the players themselves, because there clearly is some kind of mentality issue. And then moving into Coventry, yesterday, I wasn't really too sure what to think on the journey down, if I'm being honest, because we're so unpredictable, and, you know, anything can happen with Watford. So it's a real it's a real strange one to predict, but I wasn't particularly sure what we were going to do when we went to Coventry. Obviously, we changed shape, which seemed to benefit the team.
Yeah,
A
yeah, it
lot.
did. Yeah,
We seem to be in a lot more control. But I mean, we blew Coventry out of the water for, like you said, 60 minutes. We concede an awful goal defensively. Who stands off the goal
yeah,
scorer for far too long, and then just such a weird shot. I'm not really sure what Hamer's really doing. I mean, we were just having a little discussion before recording, and I can agree that maybe a more match fit goalkeeper would just not take any chances and catch it. But yeah, it just seemed like a real soft goal to give away. Obviously, then the Coventry fans got behind the team. The atmosphere
yeah.
was so flat for 60 minutes in the ground. All you could hear was the Watford fans. And as soon as Coventry
They
scored,
were
it turned into a real bear pit. And
yeah, but you could see, you could hear how frustrated they were getting.
yeah,
With,
yeah,
with Watford's press, the mistakes were being made, balls were being passed out by the goalkeeper, to touch. They were misplacing passes. We were making interceptions. Um,
mm,
you know, we just, as we've said, we just seem to be able. We have this gift of being able to get other teams back into games
yeah,
out of nothing. Out of nothing.
yeah. I mean, Coventry offered absolutely nothing, really. They had a few times where they cut in, but their
Yeah,
shooting was really poor, I thought, Coventry.
yeah, yeah. I think their decision making wasn't particularly good in the final third, particularly the first half. They looked.
Yeah,
I was watching on the TV. You were there in the ground. It looked to me like they looked fairly dangerous getting into the final third, but whether or not they'd been told to make use of the conditions and take early shots, test an inexperienced test a goalkeeper that hasn't played a lot of football in recent months,
yeah.
whether or not that was the instruction, but it clearly wasn't necessarily paying off because we were defending that quite nicely, and Heyman made some good saves actually in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a strange one for Ben Hamer. I thought, honestly, he was really brilliant in the first half. He made some saves when he needed to. His distribution was really solid. He moved the ball quickly between the defence, moving the front two from Coventry side to side really nicely. We just seemed so much more up tempo, but it really just, as soon as that bear pit kind of atmosphere, every tackle or foul was being like roared on by the Coventry fans, and then it was just like, well, it's inevitable that we're gonna wilt. I mean, as we have done so many times this season. I mean, like you said, we were lucky not to lose with that penalty, which
Yeah,
yeah probably was a penalty. So we've got to thank Keith Stroud for
yeah.
that one.
But I
Yeah,
think also that incident, if I can, I think Kamara that summed up his afternoon and his season, and to be honest, his time with us, because not up to the point where we were on the ropes, up until the point where Coventry scored, I thought Kamara was having a really good game.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And again, I was watching from the comfort of my study. You were in the ground, but he was mopping up. He was mopping up balls. He was getting forward. He was driving forward with pace. He was linking up the attack. He was getting out of difficult situations with a neat interplay between whoever it might be on his side of the pitch. I thought he looked the best of Kamara, but for the latter 30 minutes of the game until he was subbed off, he just completely lost his head. And
yeah,
I think that's his problem that he has to learn to deal with. But I think that stands for a number of players within the squad. He should have given it. It should have been a penalty. He did clip the guy. If it was in the Premier League, that goes to VAR, and the referee is going to give that. Yes, he had his hands in the air to say, I'm trying my best not to make contact. But the fact of the matter is, you let the guy, well, I forget his name. Apologies. The guy nutmegs him, gets behind him, and he's sort of running behind him, to try and interfere and stop him having a clean run in on goal, and clips him, and he goes down. It's a definite penalty, but I think that shows the fragility, the mental fragility within individuals in the side.
Yeah.
We defensively, we went from being able to bring the ball down, control it, a little pass either way, or a little flick over the shoulder or a cushioned header down, to just kicking the ball out. No nonsense stuff. Porteous giving the ball away, Porteous being caught in possession. They completely lost their heads.
Yeah.
And that is not coming from the head coach. That is because, in my opinion, the players within that side, they're either, when their backs are against the wall, they're either trying to win games individually, and I could point at João Pedro in this one.
Yeah.
Or they just don't want to be involved. They don't want to be the person that makes a mistake. And you could look at people like Chowdhury and Bakuna to an extent, and Sarr. I don't think they want to be the people that necessarily make a mistake. I'll come on to Sarr in a bit, but yeah, that was my take on the players, and probably the same argument for the Huddersfield game, but
yeah,
the main thing for the Huddersfield game, just jumping back, was Bachmann's red card.
Yeah, I mean,
which I don't know what your take is on it, but that to me just signifies somebody who cannot control their own emotions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real silly kind of first yellow card to give away, because I think it was just dissent, the first yellow card, and then the second one is just he's obviously seeing red, and he's trying so hard to get a touch on the ball, but it's just such an unbelievable moment of sport to try and kung fu kick the ball through someone.
Head.
It's really, it boggles the mind what was going through his head at the time. But I mean,
but it's not just the actions that got him sent off. It's the reaction when he was sent off. Apparently throwing his gloves off and throwing his shirt around.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable.
Mm.
I mean, it wouldn't have been a red card in Graham Taylor's era, but if a player had done that when GT was manager, I would dread to think what would have happened to that player in that changing room, and how they'd have been redressed as how Watford players should behave, and how you are looked upon by young fans.
Yeah.
Young fans, seeing that, if a kid has an issue, on the Sunday afterwards, and he gets, sent off or subbed off, does he now think it's acceptable to fling his arms in the air and, start screaming and shouting and ranting?
Yeah.
It all points to just an awful attitude amongst some of the players in that side. And something drastic needs to change.
Yeah,
something drastic needs to change. And I do wonder whether or not having more experienced players in the side, I'm thinking of people like Gosling and Cleverley. Would they have made a difference in the attitude amongst the players? Maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe.
Honestly, I think having those kind of experienced players really does make a difference, because it's in those kind of atmospheres, like Coventry, when the fans started to get behind them, then it's just the voice of calm and reason that's like, just slow the game down, don't lose your head, but we don't have anyone like that really in the team.
No.
And I don't think, Cathcart would be the oldest player that came on late on against Coventry, clearly with the idea of take off the young, inexperienced player who made his debut, bring in the
Yeah,
experienced centre back who can play out on the right as he did. Just shore up the back and just bring back that calmness that we had in the first half. But Cathcart is not that guy.
yeah. No, he's not.
He really isn't the kind of leader that Cleverley or Gosling would be, and I think we've really missed Cleverley this season.
Yeah,
And
I think.
I know he's not technically as good as somebody like Lauser or Kone or Chowdhury, but that football brain that has been developed through 10, 15 year career would be something
Yeah,
that is so much more valuable than just amazing, technique and raw ability that is
yeah,
majority of the team that we see. And
yeah,
because we don't have anyone experienced or a leader on the pitch, it just means that in those moments where people lose their head, there's no one that will get in their way and tell them they need to, pipe down, or they need to just chill, chill out, just have a moment, have a breather, and then carry on as you normally would. I mean, if we
mm.
had Troy Deeney as captain, Backman would never be in that situation to get sent off because he'd just tell him to just
Well, I
stop.
think yeah, I'm with you. I I think for me, the this is something that you know this is something that starts in pre-season. Um, you have players, you sign a player's contract, you set out, you design the culture within the side. You have these discussions, you have senior leadership groups, you have mentoring groups. All of
Mm,
this stuff, should be happening, and because you expect, if you're Watford, this season coming into recently relegated, you should be coming in going, right, okay, we're going to be one of the best teams in the league, therefore we know we're going to be challenging in the high pressure moments towards the end of the season. We know we are going to have teams come and try and park the bus effectively and slow it down and make life difficult for ourselves. Therefore, we're going to be put under serious pressure, and we're going to become intensely frustrated at times, and we cannot let that get the better of us. The players have to have that mindset when they go into these games. It's not something you can switch off and on in the
mm,
moment. This is something that is set by the playing staff, by the coaching staff, everybody in the squad. And I absolutely think you're right. But I think what Troy Deeney did, whilst he might have, just absolutely grilled Backman on the pitch, or it wouldn't have happened on the pitch, regardless of red cards are going to happen. But I guarantee, in the dressing room after the game, or on the Monday morning when they come in for training, they're probably having words, or they're having a discussion about it,
yeah,
and about how they conducted themselves. That is almost certainly not happening, or not happening appropriately in this squad at the moment.
yeah,
Cathcart is a do as I do, not as I say kind of leader.
yeah,
And there's I've got so much time for Cathcart. I think we've said before, in one of our earlier podcasts, Cathcart is probably one of the best signings under the Potts era for what he's given us and given back
yeah,
to us.
yeah.
But he's not the kind of leader that you want in these situations.
No,
And sometimes,
no, and
sorry, yeah, I know.
that kind of point really sort of makes you think like how much input is Cleverly having in terms of how much like access he has with like being with the squad. I know he's injured a lot, but I don't know how much
Yeah,
he's out like with them when they're training, or just generally being that kind of mentor to the younger players. And
yeah,
because in my opinion there needs to be some kind of um, discussion with Backman about conduct, because that
mm-hmm.
that kind of um, tantrum, for want of a better word, after getting sent off is not something that you want your football club to be associated with. So then you need to, you know, discuss his conduct. And we've seen it earlier in the season, you know, Kamara getting sent off against Millwall. And that was another instance of just pure head loss. And
complete petulant.
Yeah, and there clearly is not enough, you know, like, this is how you're representing Watford Football Club, and this is unacceptable. Then you move on. Clearly, there is some kind of culture within the dressing room, which high wage contract, you know, it kind of inflates the player's ego, and there needs to be that voice of reason, that leader that brings people back down. I mean, I was listening to Ben Foster's podcast a couple months ago when he was talking about. I know.
Be careful saying that name around Watford Twitter.
I know. But he was just talking about younger players coming in on loan while being an older player at Watford, and that kind of like big weekly wage, flashy cars, that kind of ego where they kind of think they have the world at their feet, and then they just need to be reined in a little bit by the more experienced players. I don't know how much of that's going on anymore in the club, because there isn't that kind of group of older, more experienced players that have the ability to do that. I think it's really just falling on Cathcart, who isn't that guy. Like you said, he's more of a just, I'll let my football do the talking rather than shouting and barking orders at each other. And then obviously with João Pedro being the captain, he's young and inexperienced himself. He's only 21, so he's still going to get that kind of be swept up in the moment of a game. You know, he could have that same head loss. I mean, we saw that. Yeah, like you said, that really silly yellow card at Luton. Well, there was no need to do that, just to kick the ball away as he did.
No.
Which, it kind of that kind of atmosphere in the dressing room is clearly breeding off something, which is clearly causing the players to be really like good, full of confidence when we're winning, but then as soon as something slightly goes wrong, then we're sort of capitulation FC.
I think someone who's also guilty of this is Loser.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the hand waving and sort of the angry face and the pointing and you know, it's, you know, either there is such a gulf in class in understanding and intelligence and ability from people like Loser, Sarr, João Pedro, that the rest of the team just cannot keep up with them and cope with them. In other words, you know, and if that's the case, then we either need to bring in more players at the level of the three, which isn't going to happen because we can't afford them and we're not in the right division, or they need to go and we need to sell and then reinvest into the squad, or and I think this is what's more likely, they just need to be brought into line and told to sort of, you know, try and bring the rest of the side along.
Yeah. You know? Well, there you go. It really is. I mean, we've said this so many times this season. It's like 11 individuals. Honestly, there's no real team atmosphere. On paper, every single one of Watford's squad is better than Luton, but Luton destroyed us because they have a real squad atmosphere. They all work for each other. Watford doesn't have that. It's 11 individuals. Those kind of highbrow, technically unbelievable players need to be brought back into line by that leader that we obviously clearly don't have in the club anymore. Sorry, I didn't want to jump in on your point there.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, we're at the risk of starting to repeat ourselves a little bit. But you know, I think the two games this weekend showed that in spades, that there is no accountability, there is no you know, there's no sort of utter, you know, poor beliefs in the Watford squad that is kind of binding everybody together. You know, it doesn't feel like that these guys would get into, you know, the proverbial trenches next to each other and fight their way out. which is so sad to see
Yeah.
when you look at as you said, the quality of the squad, but also the glimpses that we get in terms of individual players and what we know they can do. You know, Porteous, he's super aggressive. He gets in there amongst it. We've seen what Hoot can do in the first couple of games, and just in terms of putting himself about, never taking a backward step. Sema, work rate. Chowdhury, work rate. João Pedro, work rate. Keenan Davis, someone who gets a lot of stick, who hasn't scored as much as he should have done, who has looked unfit, blah, blah, blah. We can rattle all them off. But what we do see in fits and starts from him is someone that is happy to, bulldoze his way through teams.
Yeah.
There are players in this squad who have the ability to, work their socks off. And we see it in glimpses, but we don't see it all together. And you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, and just sort of rounding this off a little bit from my perspective.
Yeah.
What attitude does that show to a young debutant Andrews, who, in my opinion, who had a really, really good debut?
Definitely.
He didn't look out of place.
No.
He made a few good tackles. He got wrong-sided once. Took the yellow card like a true pro would do, and then was taken off because Chris Wilder, I think, quite rightly sensed that the flanks was where we were getting torn apart. So he wanted to shore up. But I thought he did really well. But if that is the first team environment that he is walking into, and if it is as bad as we're sort of discussing, that's not the environment that I would want. If I was a parent with a 16-year-old kid, I'm not entirely sure that is the place that I want my kid to go and
I agree.
go and develop and move on, which is another problem which we'll come to on another day, talking about the academy and its issues that we've had under the Pozzos. But this weekend, in my opinion, highlighted the mentally weak and fragile nature of the playing squad. And just a complete lack of leadership.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think it's really sad that I know we say this a lot, that it's just really sad, but it is quite sad that such a technically outstanding group can just wilt so easily under the pressure. And hopefully in the next season that we can build, and the only way is up, because we are really at rock bottom for Watford in the past sort of decade. So I'm not sure if we have any other kind of points that you wanted to raise.
Well, I suppose I've got one question for you, mate, because you were in the ground and you were in the ground on Saturday.
Yeah.
Ismail Assar. Does he deserve the volume of abuse or negative comments that he gets on social media? From your perspective, from what you saw on Saturday.
From what we saw on Saturday, in the first half, it really did kind of look like his mind wasn't there completely. I think he made a few sort of decent tracking back runs, but ultimately it really seemed like the game was passing him by, like it does quite often. It just seemed like another game was passing him by. Obviously he made the second goal, really nice bit of play, but it's not really consistent enough. However, I don't think the sheer amount of abuse and the volume of negative comments is necessary by any means. Obviously, he's struggling at the moment. We've spoken before about how he probably does need to move on for the sake of his career, but ultimately, no, I don't think he deserves the amount of abuse he gets. I think there's constructive criticism that you could give him, but just like from the stand, hearing like a lot of abuse towards Sarr. Yeah, it wasn't particularly nice to hear. Um,
Mm.
but no, I honestly I don't think the amount of abuse he gets is deserved, because ultimately he does create a moment of magic
Yeah.
every once in a while, but
Yeah.
ultimately he is then a passenger for the other 75% of the time, um,
Mm.
which is frustrating because he had so much talent. Hopefully he can reignite his career if he gets the move in the summer to a club like Villa or Leeds
Mm.
or somebody who can develop him. But ultimately, no, I don't think he deserves the amount of abuse. So
No,
yeah,
that's cool. No, no, that's interesting. No, I was just curious because I saw it. I read a fair bit about it, and I think, yeah, like you said, from in the ground, sort of watching him, he does sort of drift in and out. He looked more at it than I'd seen in recent weeks
yeah, I
on
think he
Monday.
looked much better in the second
Um,
half.
but I think yeah, I think it's born from frustration because you know what the player is in there,
Yeah,
and it just
yeah, definitely, because you
doesn't
know what he's
quite translate
capable of.
all the time.
Mm.
But that might not necessarily be his game because what was it, the 85th minute or something? There was that little interplay with him and João Pedro in our half, and he runs basically the length of the pitch,
Yeah,
nearly puts Arouge and João Pedro in.
yeah, that was unfortunate.
There's not many players in the championship with the pace and athleticism to make that break and run that distance at that speed.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so maybe that's his game.
yeah,
No, I was
yeah.
just curious, just curious.
No, you're right. I
What your
mean,
view? What your view?
honestly, he's obviously good enough. He's a quarter finalist of a World Cup in a Senegal squad that had no Sadio Mane.
Yeah,
And I thought he was electrifying in that World Cup. So clearly, I mean, that speaks volumes about the atmosphere at the club. Um, that
yeah,
he's really struggling at Watford. But yeah, I think we'll just round off the pod this week with
yeah.
a little bit of some of the results that have come through in the past few days. Obviously, Watford women hosted Bridgewater United at the
Oh,
Vic
yeah, yeah,
with an attendance of about 1,100, which is really amazing for the Golden Girls. And of course, they did come out winners 5-1, which is brilliant for them. And they are, yeah, again on another unbelievable run of wins and
yeah,
unbeaten. So hopefully they can get promoted
yeah. Fingers crossed. They
out
deserve
of
it.
the National League South. Um, so that would be brilliant for them. But hats off to them. They have done fantastically well this season. And obviously, as you might have seen, if you do follow us on Twitter, one of the teams that we have been following throughout Lincolnshire has been Stamford, AFC Stamford this season, who got
Yes,
promoted. The Daniels got promoted this weekend, following their game that was postponed due to
yeah.
weather.
Local
They
derby against Spalding, wasn't it?
It would have been a local derby, yes, but they did get promoted, so well done to them. They
Yeah,
absolutely
great work to
barnstormed the
them.
league this season, so
Yeah,
fantastic.
they've been. Congrats to those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any final thoughts? Any final comments, James?
Uh, no, just yeah. Thanks everyone who's continuing to listen. Maybe one day we'll have something enjoyable, more fun to talk about. But it's always good. It's always good, isn't it, to try and
Oh
to
yeah,
try and
yeah,
dissect what we've seen. Bit cathartic for us,
yeah,
um, especially for those that can't get to the game and sort of vent off and they're sort of stuck on their phone or in their house trying to follow it. Yeah, so I'm enjoying it. Um,
yeah, definitely.
plenty to talk about.
Yeah,
Plenty to talk
yeah,
about.
there
But
is. It's never a dull
we
moment
move,
following Watford.
we move.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for listening to this episode number 7 of the Yellow Squared podcast. Thank you so much for all the support we've received, particularly on YouTube and on all of the audio platforms that we're listed on. the support's been crazy, and we're really thankful. It really just gives us the extra push to create the content that we've loved creating over the past month or so. Even though the results and Watford's in a bit of a mess right now, it's just been an absolute blast to create and to put out the podcast. So thank you very much for listening. Make sure you do subscribe and like the video if you have enjoyed it. Drop us a comment if you agree or disagree on any of the points we raised. And make sure to listen on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts on. And thank you very much for listening. Take care, guys.
Cheers now.